Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Welcome to the Calvary Chapel Salmon podcast. So glad that you were joining us with us this morning.
What episode is this, Jordan? Do you know? Like numbered?
Hagen, this is episode 15.
It's already 15
Which is
weeks.
kind of a big deal, honestly.
Have you done anything for 15 weeks straight, Jordan?
Oh, man, just 100 push-ups every single day.
Well, that shows, yeah. We were curious how you have those broad shoulders.
15 weeks straight, yeah.
That's a commitment, kind of.
I've gone to church for 15 weeks straight,
Yeah. Actually, have you?
Yeah, of course I have.
Was there a Sunday you didn't go to church when you were traveling here recently?
Yeah, but before that, it was like for years.
Okay. I'm just checking in on you.
I can probably count them. Never mind, I don't want people.
Do you know there's some churches that, like in Sunday school, they give you like pins. It was really common like 50 years ago. They'll give you like pins for showing up, like not missing a day of Sunday school.
Oh, wow.
And
kind of flex on everyone.
In our church that was like raised in the Methodist church, and it was like I have the pin that's like I never missed a Sunday school class ever.
Oh, wow, like perfect attendance.
Yeah,
I
had in high school.
Me as well.
No way.
Yeah,
That's
I never
good.
got sick. I would never. I mean, I never skip. I wasn't.
Right, I would get sick,
I was
but I
gonna
would
do.
just go.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be confident, but it's not a big deal. You just tough it up,
push
Buttercup.
through it, yeah.
I did have the perfect
I didn't
attendance.
realize we had that in common.
Yeah, I guess we're both just kind of tryhards and know-it-alls and the kind of kid that would have perfect attendance.
Well,
so.
see, I bet our GPA was very different.
Yeah.
What was yours?
3.8.
Yeah. Guess what mine was?
3.2.
No, I'm the type of guy that doesn't know his GPA. So
Oh,
I'm kind
okay.
of a nerd. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a trap.
There you. Oh no.
Yeah.
You got me.
So, what are we going to talk about today, Jordan?
Oh, Hagen, I think we should talk about sharing the gospel.
Okay.
Particularly sharing the gospel in a missionary mindset. I think we want to talk about missions. And Hagen, do you know why we might want to talk about missions today? Besides just as a fun thing to talk about.
I'm guessing because by the time people are listening to this Friday, we're going to be on the road on a mission.
For sure.
So it's kind of fresh on our hearts. We're thinking a
Yes.
lot about it. We're preparing for it. So we might as well talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So we're going to Mexico, Palma Real, Mexico, Rosarito, Mexico. We're going this Friday, 6 a.m. We're loading up 3 vehicles full of 20-ish people, and 16 hours we're heading down. So definitely, if you're watching this, say a prayer for us. It's going to be a lot of fun, though. But there's a lot to talk about with missions. We would say there's a lot of just different maybe mission philosophies. There's a lot of different mission organizations out there who do things a little bit differently.
Sure.
And then there's people like us who just plan it kind of all on our own and just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So real quick, before we get too deep into missions, a couple podcasts ago, we talked about evangelism.
We did, yes.
And that sharing the gospel in that way. And that evangelism and missions overlap a bit.
For sure.
But they are still kind of very separate things in some ways. So evangelism could be... evangelism is literally just sharing the gospel, right? That's literally what the word means. Whereas missions
is like you're kind of going somewhere to share the gospel and also to love and serve people at the same time. And with
and where does that model come from? Of like meeting people's physical needs and spiritual needs.
I would probably say, oh gosh.
Like Jesus, maybe?
Yeah, probably Jesus.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to say Acts, but I was like, wait, there's something.
But
Jesus.
like you just see what Jesus did all the time. He was healing people, he was feeding people, he was comforting people, he was dealing with people who were distressed by casting out demons. So he's meeting their physical needs as well as spiritual needs.
For sure.
So that's
important.
That's where we get that model
and
from.
Yeah, so I've heard it said like sometimes missionaries, and this can be true. Sometimes missionaries or mission groups, more likely they're too focused on the humanitarian side. Like, oh, you just went and you just dug a well, but you didn't tell anyone about Jesus.
Right.
Or maybe you told a couple people the focus was the well. And it's like you want to find that balance there of like, yeah, we're gonna help people out, but we're not just there to give them free stuff.
Sure.
And to build them cool things.
Sure.
We're there to show them Jesus and show them love and to share him.
Because, like my dad taught me as a young child,
Oh, wow.
people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's very true.
So doing that physical stuff is showing them how much you care, and then they're more apt to listen to what you have to share with what you know. Or for us, who we know, and who we know is Jesus.
For sure.
So Yeah.
And you don't have to travel to a different country for that to be true.
Absolutely.
You go and you're willing to mow somebody's lawn. You're willing to help somebody in some way. They're way more likely to, well, one, just be your friend and hear what you have to say than if you're coming up to them randomly. So yeah. So there, again, like you said, there's a lot of overlap as far as mission work, evangelism, what the goal is. We do see mission work commissioned in the Bible. In Matthew 28, Jesus tells his disciples to go into all the nations. Do you have that locked and loaded?
Sure.
You want to read that?
So one of the reasons why we as believers, or why we as the church should be mindful of missions, is because Jesus told us to be. And we see this in Acts chapter 28, in Matthew chapter 28. Sorry about that.
No,
Matthew chapter 28, verse 18, it says, "And Jesus came and he spoke to them, saying, All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Amen." So that commission is going out, making disciples. That's what we're called to do. That's what Jesus did. He made 12 disciples, then 120, even more, the multitudes. Jesus's model was making disciples. He then passes that baton off to the church to continue making disciples of him, not just in Galilee or Nazareth or Jerusalem, but starting there and going out to eventually the ends of the earth, where it even makes it to Salmon, Idaho.
For sure. Two reasons I can think of right now, or why that Great Commission is so important. One, it's the last thing that Jesus told them to do before ascending up into heaven. It's kind of his last, hey, go do this, which makes it important. His last words, we could say. But then also, you could make you could say, and I've heard it been said, like, it's kind of the whole reason we're here. The whole reason that we're still on this earth as Christians is to go and to make disciples and to share God's word and to teach people about Jesus. Like, we're not, like, that it's been said, it's the one thing you can't do in heaven. You can't go and share about Jesus in heaven because Jesus will be with everyone in heaven. And so it's like, that's why we're still here.
You won't be able to tell a lost person about Jesus in heaven because everyone will be found.
Everyone will be found there. So it's kind of important. It's like why we're still here. It could be you get saved and then boom, you're instantly teleported up to heaven and boom, you get to worship him and love him and all that right there instantly. But it doesn't happen like that. Instead, you get saved and you don't get teleported up to heaven. You're still here. It's like, okay, why am I still here? Well, because there's other people that need to learn. There's other people that need to be told. And that's kind of important to keep in mind. Like, yeah, it's kind of the whole point, and we get very distracted by a bunch of other things.
Sure.
But in a very simple way of looking at it, yeah, sharing Jesus and loving other people and showing him is the whole reason that we're here, you know?
Yeah.
As his church as a whole and then as individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being mission-minded is fulfilling that. And probably the most famous missionary we have in the Bible as far as amount of content is Paul. Paul's travels to all these different places, shares the gospel, establishes these churches, moves to the next place, and does a really good job. And that's cool as Bible students to see, but also to be mindful of. There's a lot of other people going other places, starting churches as well during that time that just aren't in the Word of God.
For sure.
But that's also taking place. But there's kind of different maybe categories of missions. Yeah. Because there's like what we're going to be doing, which is like a short-term mission. So it's like we're going to go to a place for a week, 2 weeks, a month, maybe even people do. You go in, you make connections, you're accomplishing these specific things. You're either trying to start a church or you're establishing and encouraging a church that already exists and helping out there. And then you leave and you go back home. And then maybe you can go again on a yearly basis or something. There's others that are more long-term missionaries or missions where you sell everything, you get your one-way ticket, and you're just there for till you die.
Yeah.
And neither one is more spiritual necessarily. Sometimes you look at that latter one and think that the guy who sells it all and goes to Papua New Guinea and never comes back to America is more spiritual. And he's just obedient to what God has called him to do, or she. So what I like about short-term missions is that it gives people a taste, a little flavor of what God has called us to do. Specifically, that's why I like this idea of what we're trying to accomplish here this week, and that is doing it for like our high schoolers, because it's giving them a real tangible, practical experience that's going to change their life forever, and they're going to be able to see Jesus work through them, in them and through them in a way that they've hopefully never seen before. And my prayer is that they get addicted to that, and it continues to that flame just continues to get fanned so that it consumes them more and more.
Yeah, the clever way of saying that is short-term missions don't change the world, but short-term missions do make world changers.
Wow,
that's the good idea. Yeah, that's the idea behind it. Of we're going to, hopefully we and the high school students will be just as much blessed and built up and encouraged and challenged and stirred up as anything that we're doing. It's going to be just as beneficial for us spiritually as is for the people that we're serving, and we're completely aware of that. Like that, we want that. We want these kids to go and to see what it's like to serve people that they don't know, serve people who are in genuine need. That's partially why we're going somewhere like Mexico, where there's actually people who are truly impoverished. You know, there's people in poverty here in America, but it's different.
Sure.
It's different. There's genuinely children who do not have the resources or the accessibility to resources that we have here. And so we're going there to serve them in a particular way. So yeah, we're doing that, and we're giving these kids and also ourselves this opportunity to go and to see what it's like to do that. And maybe some of these kids, like you said, will get addicted to it, and maybe they'll go on to be the person who goes to New Guinea and does that, all because they went to Mexico when they were a high schooler and they realized, hey, man, serving Jesus like this is cool, and I want to go serve Jesus in another place. And so it makes the world changer. It makes it disciples them to being people who want to do that.
Or it also gives them mindfulness when they pray. Because when you just don't know, you don't know in your prayer life. But now when you've been exposed to something and you go back to your real world, you're mindful to pray for these people much more frequently. And then when these kids or whoever, you kind of grow up and maybe you don't go into full-time missions or whatever, you get a job, maybe you're much more compassionate to contribute as well financially to support those who are going. Because there's more than one way to kind of get behind a mission. Not everyone can go.
For sure.
But in order for people to go, you have to have senders and goers. And if everyone goes, there'd be no senders. If everyone goes, there's no church. Because everyone's just going. So some people have to stay in order for others to go. And praise God for the stayers, because they're able to hold down the fort. They're able to be a part of a church so that financially you're able to go and accomplish these things. And they're also behind you praying as well. So.
And it just gives the kids another benefit of what we're doing is it gives the kids just perspective of how actually blessed they are to live in America, how awesome it is that they have this fantastic church here and they're so well off.
Just such a great youth pastor.
For sure. And they live in Salmon, Idaho.
Right.
And it's like, man, it's just like, hopefully it's like, man, look at these people who have so little, yet they have joy and they're able to be excited about Jesus, and they're just have peace and all these things. And then look at me, and I'm upset and grumpy and depressed in my life, even though I have all this stuff. What's up with that? And it's just so gives them perspective of like, man, I'm so blessed. Who am I to complain about being hungry? Who am I to complain about not having this? It's just healthy in general to go and see and like, man, I am so lucky. And I need to, like it humbles you. It gives you proper perspective. It helps you pray for them, like you said. And what we're kind of maybe doing unintentionally here, Hagen, is we're kind of we're showing there's value in what we're doing as far as short-term missions, because maybe would you say that some people would look down on short-term missions? Maybe some people wouldn't see the value in what we're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the criticism maybe would be, so you're going to go and I don't know what it is, but it's probably at least 1,300 miles. So we're going to drive 1,300 miles in 3 vehicles. We're taking the time of 23-ish people for a whole week to go and to do what? Like if you look at that as like dollars and stuff, it's like there's a lot invested in that. So it's like, so what are you doing? And it's like, well, and we have this idea of what we're doing, but so people can be like critical of that if they see like, oh wow, like is it really worth it? It when you could
do something here.
Sure.
Yeah, when you could go and help out the poor people who live in Idaho Falls or the poor people who live in Boise. It's like, why go all the way to Mexico? And for the reasons we just said, because it gives you perspective, it changes your mindset. There's more opportunities down there to do that kind of stuff, and it's just good and healthy, and it makes you realize, it helps you. So like all the reasons we just talked about. Yeah,
and I know that like not most of my friends, but I have a group of friends in my life that are pastors, and they do missions different ways in their churches, and some churches are super mission minded. Like that is their focus, as far as like there's always a mission trip, they're always raising money, they're always doing this thing, and that's really cool. This, as far as for us, just specifically as our church, Calvary Chapel Salmon, is kind of our first main one. Definitely since I've been the pastor. We have a couple in our church who actually have a mission organization that they oversee that we partner with our church that does work in Kenya. But this is kind of the first one that just Calvary Chapel Salmon of itself is doing. And hopefully it's the first one that will continue on yearly.
For sure.
So my point is there's just different ways of doing it.
And going to a bigger city in America and loving people there is absolutely awesome. And there's people who need to do that. And we don't want to become so like, oh, we need to go to some poor country and serve orphans. Like, we don't need to do that.
Sure.
Like, maybe in the future we won't go to Mexico and we'll go somewhere else. We'll go to the mean streets of Philadelphia or Kensington, something like that, and we'll help people out. There's lots of ministries there that we can do. And so, like, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think it's important that we get away from our normal life for a week and we're able just to focus pure, like, I'm going to give this whole week just for serving, just for spreading Jesus' love, just for telling people about Jesus, and going somewhere for a whole week helps with that. Because if we were just to, okay, everyone meet next week and we'll just go do something cool in the community every day, like, we could do that, but we're not really getting away. We're not really, like, I don't think it would be as beneficial because we're still like comfortable here in Salmon. I'm going to go home and sleep in my bed and do my own thing. Sure. It's like, so the whole getting away and going somewhere to go and serve, it's healthy and it's good. And I think it helps with that whole, man, Jesus is going to show me stuff. So that's cool. That's important. And just giving him the whole week, that's cool. So
for sure. Yeah. So I think you mentioned on one of the past podcasts, but you've been on just one mission trip, or what's your...
Let's see. Yeah, I went on one mission trip to Guatemala when I was in high school, and that was...
Like what age do you know?
I was a sophomore. I think it was my in between sophomore and junior year summer.
Okay.
Yep. And
was that like a week? Or?
It was like a little bit more than a week. Yeah, we had to fly there, and so that
to
was
the island.
So when I went to Guatemala, I was under the impression that I was going to an island, and I did see water on the plane, so that's part of the reason why I thought I was going to an island. But upon my return and looking at a map, I realized, I did not go to an island. I just went to, it's just still part of the continent, right?
Yesterday I went to...
somebody, okay, I'm not going to tell you who, but one of the youth kids recently, dead serious, told me, because we saw those like birds that are like the Mexican country birds, right? What are those called?
Magpies.
And he was like, oh, aren't those like the state bird of Mexico? And I said, you mean the country bird, the national bird? And he said, no, the state of Mexico, because Mexico's a state. And I said, no. And I was like, and he started arguing with me. He's like, no, Mexico's a state. It's like, it's a part of America. It's like, yeah, it's a continent, it's part of America, but it's like...
It's sad when you get rebuked by the guy who thought maybe Haiti was in Africa.
I did think Haiti,
that's a rough time.
So I'm telling you, there's I do have some geography knowledge. Yeah.
But so yesterday I'm at this birthday party, and they tell this story of they had this map in their office, and one of their coworkers' girlfriends came in, and you know how like in order to like fit everything on a map with like Alaska and Hawaii, sometimes to like put them to the side, and literally this lady looks at the map and she goes, "Wow," and she's dead serious. She goes, "I didn't realize Alaska was so close to Mexico."
Pretty good. Yeah.
Well, so geography can be important in missions, knowing where people are.
For sure. And going to places makes you really, because now this kid who so happens to be going on the trip with us, he will know that Mexico is a country.
Yeah.
And that's just good to know in general in life. So
was he homeschooled?
No.
Oh,
no,
wow.
No.
Just asking.
Yeah. No. Public school. No. If he was homeschooled, he'd know. He'd know all 50 states and all 50 capitals.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
So there's actually a group of countries or nations or people that oftentimes in the mission world that people call like the unreached.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes.
The 1040 window.
1040. I always call it something else, different numbers, which is not good.
Yeah.
The 1040 window. Yes. So there's this idea where if you look at the map and you go like,
latitude.
Latitude 10 and like longitude 40.
Latitude 10 and latitude 40.
It makes this
Longitude is
rectangle.
vertical.
Anyways,
Yeah.
it makes this rectangle.
Okay.
And this rectangle takes up India, Middle East, China, and like all these parts. If you just make this rectangle on your map, and in that 1040 window, I believe it's like 90% or maybe higher of what we would consider unreached people groups. And basically what an unreached people group is this unique group of people with unique language, unique culture, and I believe it's like less than 1% of them are Christians. So an unreached people group doesn't mean like there's absolutely no Christians anywhere. It's just there's so little Christians in the population that they're unreached. India is a perfect example. There's Christians in India, but India is such, I forget, it's almost like, I think 1 billion people in India, or maybe, there's about,
no, there's a lot
so
of
many
them.
people in India, and there's so little by comparison Christians that almost all of India is considered an unreached people group because less than 1% of people there are Christians. And the idea is you go there and people don't even know about Jesus. Like maybe they've heard Jesus once while watching an American whatever, and they just never really thought about it. But they just think of Jesus as like a superhero from far away land, or like just something that they have no idea what the gospel is, no idea what the Bible teaches, no idea what who Jesus was or what he taught. They just completely, or maybe they've never even heard Jesus' name at all. That happens in some places, and it's just they don't know. They have absolutely no idea. And so the unreached people groups, there's some churches and some mission organizations that have a unique focus on going to those places and reaching them and basically, which this is cool, it's telling them the gospel for the very first time, which is very different from what we're doing going down to Mexico or what we would do in evangelism in America, because you go to someone in America and they know Jesus, they've heard of Jesus. They probably at some point, whether they were listening or not, they probably heard the gospel. Sometimes not, but they're familiar at least with these ideas like God, Jesus, Christianity, churches. That they're familiar, and we go down to Mexico. Mexico is a very Catholic country. There's churches there. There's already people have heard. And so we're going there and we're representing in some ways to these people like, hey, here's the gospel. Here's Jesus represented to you in maybe a non-distorted way. Maybe the first time they heard about him it was in a false religion or distorted way. So we're presenting Jesus to them again. The whole idea for the unreached people group is we're just telling them for the first time, hey, there's this guy, Jesus, who's God's son, and he came and he died on the cross for you. And they're like, wow, I've never heard that before. And so that's really, really cool that some people get to go do that. Now, the problem with the 1040 window is that all the countries that are in there are dominated by false religions, mostly Islam. And in Islam, you're not allowed to depending on the country, you're not allowed to evangelize. You're not allowed to proselytize. You're not allowed to convert someone. Maybe you can go there and be a Christian yourself, but if you start sharing, and again, this is different on the country, you can be thrown in jail. And so, yeah, but there's missionaries who train themselves in particular to be able to go into those countries and and go and train people living in those countries to be able to share in secret ways so they don't get caught. And so that's a whole cool thing. It's honestly, it's exciting. It's awesome what most of these organizations are doing. Like they're going and they're telling people the gospel for the very first time. And it's cool because they don't have any of the American baggage. Like they hear Jesus and they're not, because everyone in America, they hear Jesus and they already have an idea. They already got like, Jesus is this guy that my racist cousin who loves the Republican Party. He loves his Jesus. They hear Jesus and they're like, who's that? And you tell them the story of how it happened. It's like new and exciting and it's awesome. And so there's honestly, there's some really cool stuff that they get to do in that 1040 window. And obviously it's way harder. And it's something that we as a youth group wouldn't be able to do. We wouldn't be able to go to the country of Iran and spread the gospel. But yeah, there's some people who give their lives to that, which is super awesome. Yeah.
Another place where you might have the privilege of telling someone about Jesus for the first time is children's ministry.
That's true. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, kids.
So if you can't go to Iran, maybe just serve in Sunday school.
That's true.
Yep.
Yes. There's lots of really good information about this online, but some of the statistics show that like in the American church in general, most of our, and I'll get your opinion on them, most of our money, most of our energy goes to spreading the gospel to places that have already been reached. I believe it's like 95% of like missionaries who get sent out of America are going to countries or places that have already heard the gospel. They're not going to these unreached people groups in the 1040 window. We send very few people to Iran. We send very few people to India because it's harder. Because it's way easier to go to Mexico where there's already a bunch of churches and we can go and stay at that church and be established there. It's much more difficult to go to somewhere that's already not reached. Like we'll go to Kenya, but Kenya is basically one of the most Christian nations in the world. Which we should go. Like that's cool.
Guess how it got that way though?
We did that. Yeah.
Right. The church.
And some people would look at that and say, "Well, okay, we did it. Mission accomplished. Let the Kenyans work on the Kenyans, and we should go somewhere else now." And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's just how some people would see that. Like, yeah, we want to go into where it hasn't been preached before. I don't think it's Corinthians, but Paul says, I do not want to build upon another man's foundation. That would maybe be a verse that you could use for that. Like, we don't want to go and we want to go and do our own new work. Paul would go to a new place and tell people who've never heard about Jesus the gospel, which is very interesting because you look at where Paul goes in Acts, and you look at all these letters he wrote to all these churches, Corinth and Ephesus and Galatia. Well, look at those areas now. What are they? They're completely Islamic. They've been completely, which is very sad, but they're unreached again. And so it's like we can go and reach them again, which is whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, and this is my pitch for it's still okay to go to Mexico where
it
the
is.
gospel's been heard.
Yeah.
Because we have a heart for places and for people.
Yes.
And there's a very real chance that with the 20 whatever people that we take, that one of us is going to encounter a person, an individual that can experience the love of God through us and hear about Jesus and how they never have before.
For sure.
And that changes a person's life forever. And that's cool.
Yeah. And yeah, you don't want to get so obsessed with like the maps and the statistics and the big vision of we need to go to this area that you forget about that.
Yeah.
And that you forget that ultimately it's not us who go and save anyone. Like a missionary goes and he doesn't save a single person. God works through him. And if God wants to work through 20 people to save a soul in Mexico, that's the same thing as God saving a soul through some missionary who's giving his whole life in Indonesia or whatever. By the way, my friend David Castle, who grew up with me in Philadelphia, he is in Indonesia right now for a month, which is kind of a big deal. Yeah, he's with 4 people 2 guys, 2 girls. I asked him if he likes any of the girls. He said probably not. So he's going to be there for a month, and which is crazy. And that's one of those countries where you're not supposed to share. Like, it's kind of like it's a very Muslim country. So,
I feel a little bit like a hypocrite mentioning this because I've not really done a lot of it. But if you really want to be encouraged in faith, read biographies of some missionaries, like Hudson Taylor is a huge one. There's just like the craziest experiences and stories, and these people just stepping out in faith to be obedient to God, and literally it being impossible to accomplish what they're trying to do, and yet God makes it happen in the weirdest of ways. And again, I'm not the authority on the subject, but just one of, and I don't know if it was Hudson Taylor or who it was, but this guy who was running this orphanage, and literally they're literally just running day by day, and there's like hundreds of kids that are responsible for him feeding, and God would just in the craziest of ways provide for them each day to be able to take care of these kids. And
yes, I know exactly who you're talking about. George
Mueller, maybe?
Mueller, yes.
Yeah.
George
it's
Mueller.
read about
he
these
like
people,
a milk
George
truck.
Mueller,
Like they
Hudson
had no
Taylor.
breakfast for the orphans, and a milk truck broke down right outside the door. They said, the milk's gonna go bad, so do you guys want it? And they said, sure. Yeah. There's some people. So talking about the unreached and all that. There's like a philosophy, or there's like a camp of missions that's very focused on that. And sometimes this philosophy or this camp can maybe go a little far with missions and maybe put an overemphasis on missions. And they can maybe start saying things or coming up with doctrines, honestly, that the Bible doesn't teach. And one of those would be along the lines of Jesus isn't going to come back until we reach the world.
Right.
Yeah. How would you respond to somebody who would say something along those lines?
Well, I agree. The second coming is not going to happen until the gospel goes to the whole world, but that gets accomplished through a few mechanisms. Right now, the church. Then when the church gets raptured, it'll be accomplished through the 2 witnesses, the 144,000 sealed evangelists, and an angel flying to and fro throughout the whole earth proclaiming the everlasting gospel. So, yes, by the time Jesus returns and touches his feet on the Mount of Olives and it splits in 2 of Revelation chapter 19, the gospel will be declared throughout the whole world, but it's not that the church needs to go to the whole world in order to usher in the kingdom.
Yeah.
That's the mindset.
That's the mindset. We need to go. We need to get off our butts, and we need to go. And if we were just to go, Jesus would come back.
Yeah.
Already. We're the ones keeping him from coming back.
Correct. And we're establishing the kingdom of God here on earth. So as the church gets established, we're going to eventually literally conquer the whole world with the gospel, and then Jesus is going to come back and set up his kingdom.
Yeah.
My eschatology is that worldview is that things are going to keep actually getting better as the gospel spreads, and things are going to get so good that Jesus is going to come back for us. And my eschatology is almost the opposite.
Things are going to get so good that he couldn't keep himself from coming back.
In the end times, and he comes back in order to straighten it all out.
For sure.
So, yeah, you'll hear people say, and use it as like a burden in order to get people to be serious about missions. We have to evangelize the whole world in order for Jesus to come back, and I just think that's a misuse of that verse.
For sure. Yep. Yeah, it's Mark, I believe, says something along those lines, but yeah, if you look at it, it works out. Yeah, I completely agree. Another thing that maybe this group would say, maybe not another thing, and this is actually really interesting. I've heard from these people, I've been taught that, and they say this in desire, again, it's kind of motivational, like, hey, we need to go get off our butts and go do this. And I believe as a church at large, yes, that's good. Want to be motivated. But they'll say this thing, someone can only get saved through the teaching of the gospel through another person. They'll say this, and what they'll say is almost everywhere in the Bible. They'll say everywhere in the New Testament, people get saved not through dreams and visions, not through angels, but through the witness of a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone never hears about Jesus, they'll say they're not going to get saved unless a person goes and tells them. And they'll say dreams and visions can happen, but those dreams and visions will always come alongside of a person sharing with them the gospel. And I understand where they're coming from, because that's kind of what we do see in the New Testament. It's never this person had a dream and then got saved, and they never even heard about. No one ever shared. There's always a person carrying it. And I do believe that the primary way, like you said, in this world, this age, we could say, the primary way of Jesus sharing the gospel is through Jesus. Is through the church, is through us. But I think that saying that, just because it's every example we see in the New Testament, I think making that rule isn't true, and it's putting God in the box. Because just recently, there was this report that came out that 200 people living in the Gaza Strip, 200 men, whether they're part of Hamas, I don't know, but 200 men in the Gaza Strip all in one night had a dream about Jesus. And there's like this little thing going on where like people are getting saved over there. And obviously in the Gaza Strip, missionaries aren't, I mean, there might be some, but not too many people are going in there. And so like God's able to work outside of us and give people dreams and visions.
But
when
the balance is that we don't just go, well, if God wants to save someone, he'll appear in a dream, so I have no responsibility.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. You would never want to say, if God's going to save someone, he'll just show up to them and I don't need to go. No,
or he'll send you to them to tell them.
Exactly.
So that's why it's important to just be open and sensitive and, Lord, I want to just be obedient.
Yeah.
So if he's put something on your heart, you should do it.
And then the balance to that, it's like God sends you, but it's still not you saving them.
Sure.
And so like it all really does balance out at the end. Like it's God who saves them. We just want to be obedient. I'm going to go and serve and go tell people, not because it's me doing it, or not because I'm so great. It's just because I want to love Jesus and love these people, and loving these people is loving Jesus. So, But it's cool. Jesus can show up through dreams and visions, I believe. In Jeremiah it says, "If you seek me with your whole heart, you will find me." And I believe like the whole man on the island problem. Well, if the man on the island is seeking after God with his whole heart, and he's genuinely looking for God, then God will show himself to him. And I believe Jesus will show himself to him, and he will be saved because he believes in Jesus.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing. And I genuinely, I don't have a problem with, well, what about that guy who never heard? Well, if he was seeking after God, God would show himself.
I mean, I got the privilege of seeing a Muslim woman from Iran get baptized in Georgia who believes in Jesus because she had a dream and Jesus appeared to her in a dream. So it's like you hear about these things, but these are real people that Jesus is encountering in very unique ways. So we don't want to discredit that.
We don't have the mindset like, well, that's not real, or that's not whatever, because it needs to be by my mindset or my equation or how I figured it out. It's like, no, God can work in all sorts of different ways outside of that. Yeah.
So missions involve steps of faith.
For sure.
They involve sacrifice of time and money and resources and headaches and riding with people for hours on end in vans and Suburbans. And so there's a lot of that goes into it. But I would argue that if you talk to anyone who's done it and does it, they would say it's all worth it in the end. And we get to see maybe a few of the dots connect, but when we get to heaven, for sure, you'll be like, wow, that 18-hour car ride in that Suburban that's just filled with teenage boys, it was worth it. When we see in heaven the fruit of what takes place, of the sacrifice and just stepping out in faith that happens here on earth.
For sure. And the old cliche is true. You don't need to be a missionary. To be a missionary, you don't need to go across the seas. You can go across your road to your neighbor. That's a very true thing to say. It's like, we want to just be mindful of like, who are the people around me? How can I share? How can I serve them? How could I go out of my way to bless them? How could I show Jesus to them? And just, like you said at the beginning, have a mission mindset is the clever way of saying it. Like act like I'm always on a mission, because in a real way you are.
Right, and that's something that we've talked about, and I'll continue to remind us as we go, the mission is not getting to Mexico. We're on mission the whole time.
Yes.
When we stop at the gas station, you're representing Jesus, and you might have just as important encounter there as you're going to have with a kid in Mexico when you're doing a VBS. So not just getting so caught up on the end goal of, we got to get to this place. The journey is the mission. You can put that on a t-shirt if you like.
The journey
is the mission.
It's not about the destination. It's about the journey.
That's right.
Wow.
Well, real quick before we end, a quote from Jim Elliot.
Oh, wow.
Who was a missionary.
Yeah,
who
martyred. Well, I suppose that's a
gave
martyr,
up his life
in
order to share the gospel. Probably one of the more famous quotes. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And that's a super cool quote. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Wow. You're not foolish to give up something that you can't keep anyway. You're not going to be able to keep it. You're not a fool for giving that up in order to gain something that cannot be lost. And that's a beautiful heart and vision when it comes to this topic of missions. So.
For sure. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, we're going to go there, and I believe we're going to go there, and like you said, in eternity we'll look back and see it's worth it. And I think what Jim Elliot was referring to there, as far as what you cannot lose, gain what you cannot lose, is a treasures in heaven, rewards in heaven. And I think Jesus will look at us and say, hey, you gave up, you could have done a million other things this week in June 7th to 15th, but you chose to go and serve me. And maybe you didn't do it perfectly. Maybe you didn't always have the best attitude, but you still chose to do that. Yeah. And there will be a reward. There will be treasure for that.
Sure.
And I think that's cool. And that's an important, for all. And it might not seem like the biggest deal now, but man, in heaven, it's going to, when you stand before Jesus and maybe I have 5 crowns and Hagen only has 4, Hagen's going to look at me a little jealously. It's going to be a big deal then.
That's from his Guatemala trip.
I got that extra one. Yeah. For sure. Good stuff. Yeah, there's a lot we could talk about missions. You from an LDS background, I'm sure that missions is a little bit different there because you have literally the Mormon missions, the 2x2 bicycle. I guess they drive it. What do they drive? A Subaru here. They don't go on bicycles here.
Yes, something like that.
They go and they do their thing, which is different. And your dad went on a mission
to Peru for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Different. How did you think about that growing up in the Mormon church?
So it was something that pretty much every boy was expected to do.
Yeah.
When you graduated high school, to serve a 2-year mission, and they kind of talked about it in a few different ways. But one way is almost like it's a tithing on your life. So you go from 18 to 20. So by the time you're 20, you've given God 2 whole years of your life, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
As a Christian now looking at things, I like to choose to give God my whole life, not just 10% of it. So that's my kickback against that. But that heart is kind of cute for sure. But probably, unfortunately, it's not sharing the gospel of grace, but it's one of the most well-polished mission organizations in the world.
Yeah, they're good at it.
In Christianity, the biggest mission organization in the world, I'm pretty sure, is the Southern Baptist Mission Board, it's called. And they are massive and have great resources, and they really do a good job focusing on it. In circles like ours, we don't have big committees and strategies behind us. We're just a local church that is praying and asking God to lead us and stepping out in faith and seeing how he provides. And it's all good.
And the way we're doing this is why are we going to the place we're going to? Well, it's because in CBI, I met this girl who was going here, and she had this connection, and I called her and talked to her about her connections, and she brought up this really cool place in Mexico, and I prayed about it, and it's like, oh, cool. So I reached out to them. And so this is all just coming about because Jordan had a friend, and Jordan's friend had a friend and a friend, and it all kind of connects.
All that kind of almost sounds like divine appointments.
For sure.
Which maybe we'll talk about on a future podcast.
Maybe we will with a very special guest.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, I like it.
Exciting. Well, Hagen, This has just been a beautiful time.
Yeah.
Beautiful time of conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of cloudy outside, so it's might as well sit in here and do a podcast with you, Jordan.
For sure. Yeah. Would rather do some other things outside, but if I have to, I'll sit in here with you, Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you
good.
go. Cool. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Yeah. Have a good day. Go eat some good food. That's what I would say to do right now.
Okay.
Go have a little snack. You earned it.
Let him have it, yes.
You earned it. You know what I'm talking about. You really deserve it. Good job. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.